Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Bermuda DFS Tactics show. Per usual on a Wednesday night, we are going to take a final look at the forecast, see what the forecast holds for Bermuda Port Royal Golf Course. We're going to take a look at the mixed condition model that I've made for the week, my rankings, and at the end of the show, as always, we'll make some lineups. So we have a lot to cover. Let's not waste any time. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally on Mondays I post research regarding some course info, patterns of previous winners. Have not done much for the fall, considering a lot of these events are either fairly new or there is not a lot of consistency among previous winners. But when 2026 starts in earnest at the beginning of the new year, be on the lookout for my research that I normally do. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show, so that'll be out later this evening after the show. You want to see the players I've wagered with my own money and the players I'm using most often in my lineups, go give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I can't recommend it enough. By subscribing to his article, you're going to get his deluxe version, which comes out every Wednesday with his projected ownerships, favorite plays, all of that. I can't recommend it, can't recommend it enough. So make sure you're subscribed to his article and go follow him over on social media. Show him some support. Lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you. In addition to the poll question, which I'll post momentarily, who is your winner? Who have you targeted this week? Any wagers that you've made that you feel brave enough to put in chat? Put those in there. Would love to hear from you all. And then if you're not able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's figure out our strategies and our tactics for the 2025 Bermuda Championship. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Wednesday evening over at the Super Forecast at Windfinder for Bermuda. Let me go ahead and post this poll question, considering the forecast that we have had all week and what seems to be consistent for this tournament week. How much should you factor the wind into your lineup decisions and or betting decisions? A lot, somewhat, a little, not at all. Feel free to put your answer with the poll question. The forecast is very, very similar to what we have seen throughout the week. They did, in fact, get a whole lot of rain yesterday. Tomorrow morning looks pretty hard, pretty difficult, with sustained winds into the mid-20s, gusts as much as 40 early in the morning. So the earliest tee times seem like they're really going to struggle, and it's going to be cold in the morning. And then, well, I shouldn't say that. It's actually, it's supposed to drop, the temperature's supposed to drop throughout the day as it looks like a front is coming in. And then once the players start tee times in the afternoon, it looks like they're going to have some rain, but the wind's going to die down. So we're not entirely sure we're going to be on schedule. This very, very well could have some delays, but we can't anticipate that. So with this forecast, you would have to say that the Thursday PM portion has a significant advantage for tomorrow. And then we move to Friday. Does look like the wind is going to die down quite a bit for the afternoon and then pick up again Friday afternoon. So it looks like the Thursday AM, Friday PM are going to get the worst part of the wind on both days, at least with this forecast. So with this, if this is the last forecast you get and you receive, it's really, really hard for me not to recommend a pretty heavy Thursday PM, Friday AM advantage, just based on this. Now, what I will say, you'll notice these wins on Friday, into the high single digits, maybe touching mid double digits. If we zoom out, the regular forecast shows Friday with a lot of wind. So something's not adding up here. Because this is not what it looks like when you dig into the super forecast. Because of this, when I made the mixed condition model last night, I was going off of this. A lot of this. Meaning I factored in wind a whole lot. And then once we zoom in, it actually doesn't appear like Friday morning is going to have a lot of wind. So if it indeed plays like this, my mixed condition model is going to be a little bit weak because I put quite a bit of wind into as a factor, as a filter. Just wanted to give you all that heads up, considering when you zoom in or take a look at the super forecast, this is what it says versus a zoomed out picture has this. So take that for what you will. Therefore, if Saturday and Sunday are similar to Friday in that regard, that it is a mismatch, I'm going to be extra weak to it. But this zoomed out forecast has a lot of wind. A lot of wind. And that's why I factored in so much wind into my mixed condition model. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National. I will keep Wind Finder up in case there are questions or we get an update during the show. I meant to have these players unstarred before the show. My apologies. Not a whole lot of review that we can do. I told you that I factored in quite a bit of wind. So instead, let's take a look at short courses, because I did not factor in any short course filter into the mixed condition model. So on short courses, those less than 7,200 yards, and this is very short at just over 6,800 yards, your top performers on short courses in the field this week: Mark Hubbard, Patrick Fishburne, Eric Cole, Ryo Hitsatsune, Bo Hostler, Chandler Phillips, Victor Perry, Jonathan Bird, Patrick Rogers, Matt Kuchar, and Alonto Griffin. The only other filter, again, based on that forecast that we have had all week, would be the moderate and windy. I used just the windy filter because of what I explained and how the zoomed out forecast has a lot of wind. So because of that, let's go ahead and jump into the mixed condition model that I made for the Bermuda Championship this week. And right off the bat, this is, a little bit of why I had to clarify my thought process and show you the difference between the zoomed out big picture view of the forecast versus the super forecast, the zoomed in portion. I've got 10% in total strokes gained, just total performance in just the windiest of conditions. A lot of times I will use moderate and windy, but again, when I made this mixed condition model last night, I didn't have access to the super forecast, especially for Friday, and I just saw sustained winds into the 20s, which meant windy, very windy. So 10% there. If the sustained winds aren't there, I'm going to be quite weak this week. Just saying. 10% total performance in the windiest of conditions. 15% in approach, especially since we don't have any shot link data. This is kind of my default. to put 15% approach. I do think that this could be a little bit light depending on how much fairways are going to matter because of the wind. You'll notice that I don't have any off the tee. I've been pretty adamant about that this week, that I just don't see off the tee mattering, especially since a lot of players are clubbing down on these short par fours, hitting 3-woods, even a lot of irons off of tees. So I don't have any off the tee, 15% in approach, 10% in around the green. With the amount of wind, I do expect this to be pretty difficult this week, at least more difficult than it has played in years past. These greens aren't necessarily the easiest to hit anyway, due to the amount of wind that has been here or prevalent in years past. 10% around the green. I do think players are going to miss their fair share of greens this week. I want to make sure players are tidy around the green this week. 10% around the green. 10% putting. You'll see this filter of multiple courses and multiple seasons. This is looking at specifically TIFF Eagle Bermuda, Bay Hill, Kapalua, PGA National, RSM, Sea Island. All of these courses are making up this subset of data for specifically TIFF Eagle Bermuda, because that is what we are on. And when I went and looked into it in years past, traditionally players who have performed well here have putt well at those other courses most often. I mean, you'll have your outliers, sure, but a lot of times you'll have a lot of success on TIFF Eagle Bermuda, and then you'll come here and have a decent amount of success, even though we don't have strokes gained. So 10% in putting on specifically TIFF Eagle Bermuda. 5% good drives gained, again using that windy filter. I want to see the players who are hitting fairways in the wind, or they are capable of controlling their golf ball if they're in the rough. But a lot of this is just kind of fairway finding for me. I think it's going to be pretty imperative to be in the fairway this week with the amount of wind that is in the forecast. 5% good drives gained. I only did 5% because of this very, very specific filter. 10% bogey avoidance when rounds have been difficult relative to par because of all the wind. I do think this is going to play more difficult than a lot of people think. You'll notice that I don't have any birdie gained metric in here. If this does not play as difficult as I think, that is the second big factor of how I will just be off this week. I think it's going to be pretty windy, at least per the forecast. I think it's going to play pretty difficult because of that wind. So no birdies gained, only bogey avoidance. 10% bogey avoidance when rounds have been difficult relative to par. I talked all week how I've been focused on wedges. And then with all of the wind in the forecast, I can see players being pretty conservative off the tee, laying back quite a bit to make sure they're in the fairway. So I went ahead and did 5% in the two longer proximities that I've been considering this week. I've been looking at 75 to 150 essentially all week. I went ahead and did 100 to 150, thinking that players are going to be a little bit more conservative than usual. 5% in each of those. 5% in each of the long par threes. There is one par three that measures 148 on the scorecard, but 3 of the 4 par threes and the 3 toughest holes at Port Royal are the par threes that measure over 200 yards. 215, 235, 235. 5% in each of those ranges. And then lastly, 10% in the par fours, the very short par fours, 350 to 450. There is only one par four that measures over 450 yards. It's at 458. It is one of the harder holes on the course, but with only one par four to that range, generally who is going to play, or who plays this range the best, is who's going to play well that week. So I wanted to see who's been performing well on these short par fours this year. No par 5 in the mixed condition model. I just kind of ran out of percent, especially since I wanted to factor in wind performance. I wanted to make sure I had a decent emphasis in around the green, since I think it's going to be difficult. Because I think it's going to be difficult, I wanted to see, make sure I had enough weight in bogey avoidance. I've been focused on these ranges of proximities all week, so I didn't want to ignore them. No par 5s in the mixed condition model. That is the third bit that I will be, very, very weak to, if it matters for tournament play. I don't think it's going to, but it very well could. So hopefully that explains the thought process behind the mixed condition model, the areas where I'll be weak. Again, no off the tee. If it's not as windy as the forecast makes it seem, if it's not as difficult as I think it's going to play, if par 5s matter, I'm going to be weak. But otherwise, I just kind of went with my instincts as to looking at that forecast, trying to extrapolate, what data I could and how I think players are going to play Port Royal this week. So with that, we'll move to Microsoft Excel, the reveal of my rankings. My rank, for your information, if you're a new viewer, and as a reminder for returning viewers, my rankings are based on 3 criteria. The FNGC rank, which is a numerical ranking from Fantasy National based on the mixed condition model we just talked about. The metrics, percentages, filters that we just covered. Fantasy National will spit out a rank. Your course value here is the second portion. This is an attempt at giving players a numerical value at how well they have played that course the last 5 years. The lower the number, the better. So somebody like Patrick Rogers, Seamus Power, who's a former champion, Justin Lauer down here has an amazing course value because he is 4 for 4 with 3 top 15s, I believe. He's just played very well here. So the lower the number, the better. But I do factor in course history. And then we are playing DFS projected ownerships, and these are from Gabe. Projected ownerships are a factor into my rankings. We are playing DFS. We're trying to find unique options off of our fellow contestants. Notice that I did not mention that what half of the draw a player is in factors into my rankings. That is why I put this column here and color code it for you, the viewer. That way you can see, as I think the Thursday PM, Friday AM has the favor. They are highlighted green as opposed to the players that are on the bad half of the draw in red. But that does not factor into my rankings. This is just a straight numerical computation, if you will, in terms of rankings. My rankings for the Bermuda Championship this week goes Mark Hubbard first. I would not put him first, especially because he is on the bad half of the draw, but Fantasy National loves him. He is not overly popular at 8,500 at his price point, and he's played very well here. So he is number 1 in my rankings. Patrick Rogers is second, and I do like Patrick Rogers a lot this week, despite the bad half of the draw. Seamus Power third, Sam Ryder fourth, Andrew Putnam fifth in my rankings. Grayson Sigg, Taylor Montgomery, Matt Kuchar, 6,500. Paul Peterson is ninth, but he's in the bad half of the draw, so take that for what you will. But I'll talk about him a little bit later. And Matt Wallace rounds out my top 10. So you see, really, a lot of the upper part of the price board is not in my top 10, which tells you the kind of lineups that I'm going to be building this week. Highest being Rico at 13th, but he's on the bad half of the draw. He's the most projected owned player, so he's falling a decent bit with that. None of the 10Ks are up here, and even the highest 9K is not up here in Nico. So with that, there's a look at my top 10. Again, not really a whole lot of surprises. Maybe Sam Ryder, but Fantasy National loves him. He's also very unique. One of the best Tiff Eagle putters around here. He actually plays these par fours really, really well as well. So, he hadn't had the biggest amount of success here, but I'm a little surprised to see him this high, but I figured he would rise a little bit. Otherwise, I don't really have a whole lot of surprises here, considering I'm factoring in a lot of short game stuff, 10% around the green, 10% putting, which I usually don't put much of, if any, in my mixed condition models. I'm normally approaching off the tee, but with no off the tee, this gets jumbled up quite a bit. And with the performance in the wind, you really see only a couple of players that have played poorly rise in windy conditions, in the sense of Grayson Sigg and Taylor Montgomery. Montgomery is actually falling because he's never played the Bermuda, but I do think this is a good fit for him. The number one putter on Tiff Eagle Bermuda, fourth and around the green, last 36 rounds. His irons have actually been pretty good compared to the rest of the field. He has struggled in the wind. That is his kind of bugaboo. Otherwise, we'll talk about Peterson, but I mean, you look here, he doesn't have any bad statistics in the metrics that we pulled for the bulk of the mixed condition model. Fourth in performance in the wind, top 10 around the green last 36 rounds. He's got a lot of things going for him. He's just never played here, and he's on the bad half of the draw. Anyway, enough of that. We'll sort on the price board, figure out where our fellow contestants seem to be going at various areas of the price board, and how we can maneuver around them. So in the 10Ks, in the 5 digits, we have 3 players. Rico Hoey at 10-4, Kevin Yu at 10-3, Thorbjorn Olesen at 10-1. I'm going to be honest, I don't really like a whole lot up here. I will play a little bit of Rico Hoey just because he's been playing great lately. Number 2 in irons, very good in the wind, at least compared to a lot of others in the field. With Rico, it is just simply about the putter. He's not been very good on this surface. He is last in this field, 120 players in the field. He ranks 120th on Tiff Eagle Bermuda. It is all about the putter for Rico. I don't like the fact that he's on the bad half of the draw. He has played well in the wind, so that shouldn't bother you. But another thing, too, Rico has kind of struggled with wedges. He's much more... he's much better with his mid to long irons. He's kind of struggled with 100 to 150 proximity, and he's not been particularly good on long par 3s, even though he is a good long iron player. So interesting to note that. I will dabble a little bit of Rico. I am way under 24-25%. I'll have him twice, maybe 3 times. That's about it. I don't want any part of Kevin Yu. You see how poorly he rated out. He's on the bad half of the draw. He's not been good in the wind. He is not a good putter. Just no thanks on Kevin Yu. I don't see why he's even at 15%, even though he is the pivot in the 10Ks. I'm just not there. And then Thorbjorn Olesen, yes, he is the one 10K player that is on the good half of the draw. I'm still not in love with it. He's getting a lot of attention, probably because he's on the good half of the draw. He's not the greatest putter. He's actually not been great at avoiding bogeys when it's difficult either. If we take a look at his page, he hasn't been the best when it's difficult. He's been okay. But even, being a Euro, you would think he's, better in the wind. He actually at least on the PGA Tour, has not been very good in the wind. Not a very good putter except for on bent. Yeah, I'm going to play some Thorbjorn Olesen because he is the one 10K player that's on the good half of the draw. So I'll play him a little bit, but I'm going to be well under 20 to 25% on him. Much like Rico Hoey, I'm going to have him 2 or 3 times, and that's about it. Again, based on my rankings, you could probably see or tell the kinds of lineups that I'm building this week. I'm just not up in the 10Ks much this week at all. In the 10Ks, I would prefer Thorbjorn Olesen just because he's on clearly the good half of the draw. The only one of the 3 that's on the good half of the draw. I will sprinkle some Rico Hoey. I want no part of Kevin Yu. Moving into the 9s. Nico, 97. Pearson Coody, 96. Rogers, Matty Schmid, Michael Brennan, Jespers Vincent, Matt Wallace, and Vincent Whaley round out the rest of the 9Ks. I like Nico this week, but everyone else does as well. So I can't get terribly excited about Nico Echeverria just because a lot of people like him, but for good reason. He's a top 5 putter on this surface. Does pretty darn well with these wedge and short iron proximities. Very good at long par 3s as well. So there's a lot to like here. This ownership is fairly ugly. So I'm going to try to limit my use of Nico Echeverria. But if I have some money left over, generally speaking, I've been coming up to Nico Echeverria. So I'm sure I'll be more than 25%. I just don't like being more than 25%. Because of how popular he is. Spent some time this week talking about Pearson Coody, especially with longtime viewer Phil. Phil seems to be very high on Pearson Coody. I'm not as high on him. His big strength is his off-the-tee game, which I think is quite mitigated here. Having said that, he's pretty good in the wind. Pretty decent when it's difficult. 40th in bogey avoidance when it's difficult. Plays the long par 5s okay. It's fine. I just don't like the fact that he's on the bad half of the draw. So I'd much rather go up to Nico than Pearson Coody this week. Despite the fact that he's on the bad half of the draw, I'm all in on Patrick Rogers. Rogers has played very well in the wind. Very well in the wind. Probably the highest pedigree player in the field. You can argue that, but plays well in the wind, plays well in moderate, plays his best when it's difficult, when I think it's going to be. His putter is very cold right now, which is, worrying. It's concerning, but he's been pretty good ball striking. Around the green's been hit and miss. I don't know. I got attached to Patrick Rogers early this week. He seems to be quite a big pivot off of Nico, off of Thorbjorn Olesen. Well, that's probably the fact that he is in the bad half of the draw, but Patrick Rogers was somebody I keyed in on early this week. Top 15 in irons. The around the green's been bad, no doubt about it, but especially on this surface, even though his putter has been really bad lately, he's actually one of the top putters on this specific surface. Avoids bogeys when it's difficult. Will find fairways and greens in the wind. Again, pretty good wind player. Acceptable to even great at short par 4s. I just like a lot with Patrick Rogers. I do worry about his half of the draw, but if you're not willing to full stack a team of 6 of 6 with your good half of the draw, you're going to have to find somebody from the perceived bad half. I'm going to be all in on Patrick Rogers on the bad half of the draw this week. Elsewhere in the 9s, despite the fact that he is known as a big hitter, Jespers Vincent rated out very, very well. Good irons, really good in the wind, and I was surprised to see that he is putt well on this surface. Now, this is Very, very small sample size. It is the Sony and maybe one other tournament, but he putt well there, and he played the Sony pretty well. The Sony does not reward off the tee play, at least driver. That is a positional course, so it shows that he can play well when his big weapon is mitigated. Devours these short par fours. Take a long look at Jesper Svensson in the good half of the draw. Quite unique in the 9Ks. Like Jesper Svensson quite a bit. I also like Matt Wallace. I know the putter doesn't seem very good on this surface, but very good around the green. Avoids bogeys when it's difficult. Top 15 in that regard. Second around the green. Top 10 in wind and performance in the wind. I like Matt Wallace. He is on the bad half of the draw. And as much as I like Vincent Whaley, he's got a similar problem that Nico Echeverria does. He's just very popular. But I love everything about Vincent Whaley. Yes, the irons haven't been great lately. Damn near top 10 around the green. Top 10 putter on this surface. Top 20 performance in the wind. At least in this field. Top 10 bogey avoider when it's difficult in the wind. The concerns with Vincent Whaley are the astronomically high projected ownership and the fact that his proximities aren't great with the wedges. He will definitely have to clean this up if he wants to continue to perform well, but he has performed well here in the past. Very well in the past. Vince Whaley, again, the irons haven't been great lately, but a lot of that is just a very horrific Bay current. But if we take a look at his Bermuda performance, I mean, 3 straight top 10s at at the Bermuda, 5th, 8th, and 7th. I mean, there's something about this course that he really, really likes. Actually, didn't mean to click out of that. You see, he plays his best when it's windy. He prefers Bermuda putting. Yeah, he prefers easy, but you can't always get what you want. I like Vince Whaley quite a bit. I'm not going to try to steer you away from Vince Whaley. Just understand he is quite popular. 17% projected ownership per game. But I do like him. I like Nico as well. They're just very popular because they're on the good half of the draw, which brought me to Jesper Svensson and Patrick Rogers. So in the 9Ks, playing some Nico, probably playing more Nico than I want, just because the lineups that I'm building, I can just afford to come up to him. I am putting a pretty big limb, I'm putting my stack of chips all in on Patrick Rogers. It's quite a leap of faith considering he's on the bad half of the draw, but Rogers is somebody I keyed in on, early this week. I am a little surprised to see Jesper Svensson rate out so well, so I'm going to play him knowing that he's going to be pretty unique. And I like Nico, I like Vince Whaley. He's just popular. Moving into the 8s. Only a couple players that I really want to talk about here. Despite the fact that he didn't rate out well for me, Alex Smalley has been fantastic around Port Royal. So if you're a big believer in prior course history or prior course performance, you really want to consider Alex Smalley. He was the last player that I removed from my player pool. So just be aware of that. I ended up not playing any Alex Smalley, but I heavily considered him because he's played so well here. Otherwise, probably not a whole lot of surprise in who I'm going to here. I love Matt Kuchar, so does everybody else. But Kuchar is somebody that I've keyed in on all week. Technically number 1 by Fantasy Nationals model. He's falling because this is an arbitrarily high number since he's never played here, and he's popular, so he's dropping down to 8th from 1st off of just the mixed condition model rankings. But number 1 performer in the wind in this field. Top 15 around the green, top 20 with the irons. He's a very good putter, top 10 bogey avoider. Kuchar's got a lot going for him. He's been anchoring a lot of my lineups. I'm telling you, even though he's popular, I'm going to be astronomically much more than 20% or 15 or whatever he ends up being. I'm going to be well overweight on Matt Kuchar. If he does not play well, I will lose this week. All in on Matt Kuchar, just like I am on Patrick Rogers. I do like Mark Hubbard. I do worry about his tee time, his bad half of the draw. I'm just much more confident in Kuchar at essentially the same price. Yes, Kuchar is about 5% projected more ownership. I'm just that much more confident in Kuchar. Hubbard's fine. I'm just wary of the tee time, and I want to like Eric Cole. This course sets up very well for Eric Cole. I just don't like the tee time. But top 10 in the irons. You see very good putter on Tiff Eagle. Good around the green. Like, this course sets up well for Eric Cole. He didn't play well in his one try here, but there's a lot to like. Just I'm scared off by the tee time. So in the 8s, I'm going to be overloaded on Matt Kuchar. I'll play a little bit of Mark Hubbard. I'll play a little bit of Eric Cole. That's really about it. I wanted to like Smalley. He was my last cut of my player pool. Moving into the upper 7s. Going to be honest, there's not a whole lot I like here other than Doug Gim. He has not fared particularly well here. Decent enough in the wind, but much like Rico Hoey, kind of comes down to the putter. He hadn't been great. And because it's difficult, a lot of times you have to depend on your putter to avoid bogeys. He hadn't avoided bogeys very well. It's fine. I'm not thrilled if I'm using Doug Gim, but I will definitely use him since he is on the good half of the draw. Instead, again, even though he's popular for the price range, I'm going to come down 100 and be all in on Seamus Power. Like, the around the green doesn't rate out well right now. He is very good around the green. He's just in not the greatest form around the green right now. Very good wind player. Good with the irons at the moment. Loves putting this surface. He's a former champion of this tournament. Number 1 bogey avoider when it's difficult here. And look at these proximities. 2nd and 1st from 100 to 150. I don't think that's a coincidence. This is set up for Seamus Power. So I'm going to use metric tons of Seamus Power this week. I actually like Patrick Fishburne as well. Again, bad half of the draw, but number 2 performer in the wind behind Matt Kuchar, who is number 1. So number 2 in wind performance, top 20 in irons. Also pretty darn good with the proximities. So you can take a look at Fishburne. He's quite unique because of the bad half of the draw. So I dabbled a little bit of Fishburne, but again, I'm just all in on Seamus Power. Sam Ryder, again, bad half of the draw, but rated out very, very well. Very good putter. You're playing Sam Ryder for the putter on the surface. Lee Hodges, anytime par 3s are a big factor. You think about Lee Hodges. Not the best performance in the wind, for sure. But, again, like these long par 3s, stellar. And actually, very good at these short proximities as well. So, all of this is, roughly like 5% of the mixed condition model, but he's been very good at it. So, I kind of like Lee Hodges. He's disappointed me in tournaments past, so I tried to limit my use of him, but, there's a lot going for him. Same with Grayson Sigg. Rates out very well. Has played pretty darn well here. I'm quite concerned about his performance in the wind. He is not good in the wind. And it's going to be very windy this week. So, I'm quite concerned about that. But number 4 in irons, I talked about this last week at El Cardinal in Cabo. Take a long look at Sig, as his irons have been blistering lately. That continued to be the case. Number 1 and number 5 in the short proximities. So Sig's got a lot going for him. Good half of the draw. And then moving lower into the 7s. Like Taylor Montgomery rates out well. He never played here. Not the best in the wind, but number 1 putter on this surface. Great around the green. The irons have actually been acceptable lately. I don't know. Top 8 in both short par 4 lengths. Anytime I want to get excited about Taylor Montgomery, he just implodes. But this would technically be a good fit for him. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be very cautious in my use of Taylor Montgomery. Justin Lauer makes a lot of sense. The strokes gained total leader. The last 5 years at the Bermuda Championship, but very, very popular. Very good in the wind. Good putter on the surface. Makes a lot of sense. Best course value. Again, he's just the most popular player in this area of the price board. So instead, I want to give you 2 names in the low 7s. First, surprisingly, is Chandler Phillips. Phillips is somebody that I was intrigued by all week whenever we went through a lot of the rankings and the top 10s of various metrics. The more difficult and the more you think around the green is going to matter, really take a look at Chandler Phillips. Top 5 around the green. Yes, he's not played well in the wind. That's an issue. But he is on the good half of the draw. Unique. Irons are fine. Good putter on the surface. Very good at the 350 to 4 par 4s, which you need to do. 4th in the 125 to 150. So you would hope that he would play to his strength in this range here. I don't know. It's worth a look is what I'm getting at. It's worth a long look on Chandler Phillips. But the player that I've been going to most often down in the low 7s is Andrew Putnam. I trust the irons more than what it is showing here. 3rd and around the green. Decent enough in the wind. Top 20 putter on the surface. Very good at these short par 4s. For that matter, you could take a look at Noah Goodwin as well. For the same reason. Very good on these short par 4s. Putnam's going to find the fairway. He's not going to take himself out of the hole. Good with these proximities. So I've been going to Andrew Putnam a lot in the low 7s. But looking at it, Noah Goodwin kind of makes some sense as well if you wanted to take a look at Noah Goodwin. And then moving into the 6s, to be honest, I'm not down here much because of the style of lineups that I'm making. But I can make a case for a few players down here. First off, David Skins. 6,800, good half of the draw. Very good with the irons. Another one of these players like Lee Hodges, when you think of par 3s, you need to think David Skins. Also good in the wind. Top 10 putter on the surface. But again, it's the par 3s. At 6,800, you're hard pressed to find a better performer on long par 3s other than maybe Chan Kim than David Skins. So really like David Skins if you're down here in the 6s. He's on the bad half of the draw, but Matteo Montecero, you want to talk about somebody who kind of stood out when going through some of these top 10 rankings of various metrics. Top 15 in irons, the number 1 around the green player in the field this week. Good on these short par 4s. Good with these proximities. So he is on the bad half of the draw. I'm telling you, I used him once. Matteo Montecero, I used him once. But I did want to make sure I had at least some exposure to him based on a lot of things that I liked seeing. And then he gets the bad half of the draw, and it really kind of is a buzzkill in that regard. But The only other name that I'll two names. Tyler Duncan, interesting. He's been on the Korn Ferry Tour this year, but he's went back and forth between PGA and Korn Ferry Tour. You see he plays very, very well in the wind. He generally plays well at these Caribbean events. Top 10 putter on the surface. Good bogey avoider. He's been on the Korn Ferry Tour, so he doesn't have a lot of statistics to go off of, but I figured I would mention Tyler Duncan in that regard. And then the last one, kind of like Mateo Anacero, somebody that I keyed in on early this week, and then he ends up getting the bad half of the draw, is Paul Peterson. Ranked 7th by the metrics, top 5 performer in the wind, good enough with the irons, top 10 around the green, top 15 putter on the surface. You see his performance on these short par 4s. Loves short wedges or wedge distances, but also performs well on long par 3s. So I wanted to like Paul Peterson a lot. He is still technically my mad scientist play, but I've cooled off on him since he does have the perceived bad half of the draw. But Paul Peterson is my mad scientist play. If you wanted the mad scientist play of on the good half of the draw, I would have said Andrew Putnam. That's a little bit higher ownership than I like for a quote mad scientist play. So I'll say Chandler Phillips, but I really like Andrew Putnam this week. All right, enough of that. Let's start making some lineups, figure out how our fellow contestants seem to be building their lineups, and how we can maneuver around them. All right, the most projected owned player, at least as of right now, is Rico Hoey. So we'll start there. And looks like our fellow contestants are stopping at Justin Lauer, Grayson Siggs getting some love, Seamus Power. So we'll go Justin Lauer, Seamus. Might have to include Grayson Sigg, but Rico and Nico Los Echeverria. Yeah, we're going to have to include Grayson Sigg for sure. This is Seamus. And then the other 7,600, Fishburne's getting a little bit. Carson Young's getting a little bit. Yeah. Maybe Nico is a little bit too much, but again, I'm just trying to highlight the highest amount of ownerships down here with Lauer and Sigg, Power. Perhaps they try to find a way to fit Kuchar into this. So if they come off of Nico Echeverria, this would be like Kuchar and 87. Smalley's getting some. That actually might go like Hubbard. Not a whole lot in terms of total ownership, but these are the players that are the most common in their price range. So this is going to be a pretty common lineup. Otherwise, they would do something like Thorbjorn, Olesen, Nico Echeverria. Again, coming down to Justin Lauer, Sigg, Power, and then 79, Takumi Kanaya, 9%, Bo Hostler at 78. There's a little bit more ownership there for you because you have two of the big three essentially in ownership instead of just Rico Hoey if they go like Thorbjorn Olesen and Nico Echeverria. And this is why I'm not as excited about Nico, is because he's just going to clog up a lot of that ownership. So how are we going to maneuver around all this? Well, I'm not doing it often. I've done maybe 10% lineups that are stars and scrubs. I've given you a couple of names in the 6Ks. I gave you the name David Skins, who's on the good half of the draw. I mentioned Mateo Montecero. If you really want to get greedy, like all the way down to Paul Peterson. I understand he's on the bad half of the draw, so if you're a little averse to that, I'd understand it. But if you go to Peterson, you can really squeeze in a lot up here at the top part of the price board. Maybe you like Rico Hoey. I'm not all that thrilled with him, so I'm going to do Thorbjorn Olesen. For me, this would be Patrick Rogers, but I'm also saving him for the style of lineups that I've been doing most often. So you go Thorbjorn Olesen. You can probably get away with a Nico. Just understand you're setting yourself up for like a 4v4 starting these two. But you are going to be pretty unique if you're willing to come into the 6Ks like our fellow contestants seem not to be willing to do. And then you could even try to squeeze in another 9, I bet. Like if you wanted to do like Jespers Vincent, you could easily do that. Because I really like Andrew Putnam at 71. And then down here, like 74 and lower, Justin Lauer, Taylor Montgomery, Chandler Phillips. You've got options. Let's do Justin Lauer because we know he loves this course. Again, this ownership seems a little bit high. It's just because you have your two of the big 3 ownerships hovering there. This lineup's probably going to be fairly unique. Now you might be in a 1v1 and a 2 or a 2v2 because of Lauer, Echeverry, and Thorbjorn Olesen. But Putnam's going to give you a lot of uniqueness. Jespers Vincent is very unique in the 9Ks, and not very many of our fellow contestants are coming down to the 6K. So if you're wanting to get greedy, if you want to do a more stars and scrubs style lineup this week, then this is the route I would go. Again, I would go Patrick Rogers instead of Nico Echeverria. I'm just showing you that you have the capability to squeeze in 3 9K plus players if you wanted to, using Svensson as a bit of a pivot here to keep the ownership down. But the way I've been building my lineups, probably no surprise, I've been building a bunch of balanced lineups, and I've been leaving quite a bit of money on the table, anywhere from 400 to 1,000. I'm just willing to leave some money on the table this week. A lot of my lineups have been starting with Patrick Rogers. I just have, again, I have no problem using Nico, and sometimes I come up to Nico Echeverria just because I have the money to do it. But I'm getting a whole lot of uniqueness off of him with Patrick Rogers. Yes, he's on the bad half of the draw. It's just I'm very confident in Rogers this week. I love Vincent Whaley. I don't mind using Jespers Vincent. Like, you could actually do a little bit of what I just did, just more in a balanced way. Rogers, Vincent Whaley, bottom out at the Andrew Putnam. You can even probably use like a Seamus Power in here. And then, fill it out how you want. Grayson Sigg maybe, Lee Hodges, Patrick Fishburne. Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of maneuverability there. If you're willing to start with Patrick Rogers, just to show you the difference that it makes. If we were to start with Echeverria, I mean, you're well getting into duplicating your lineups. So that's why I've been starting with Patrick Rogers. And then just to finish this one out, let's go Lee Hodges, just for the sake of it. Sub 10, you're at 66% total cumulative ownership. I know this is leaving only 100 on there, and I've said that I was leaving anywhere from 4 to 1,000. Just trying to show you the options that you have, because I went double 9s in here. I'm telling you right now, I'm doing like Kuchar, who's right about Vincent Whaley's ownership. So, dropping down to Kuchar means I have 500 left on the table, about the same amount of ownership. These are the style of lineups that I've been building this week. Double 9s and Kuchar, or triple 9, triple 7. I would like, more in the 8s with the exception that most of them just have the bad half of the draw. Hubbard, bad half of the draw. Eric Cole, I like this week. Bad half of the draw. Even Victor Puri, who rated out top 20 for me, bad half of the draw. So my core this week, I'll list Nico, but he's at the, kind of the bottom of it. Definitely Patrick Rogers, Whaley, Svensson as well, but I'll list Whaley. Matt Kuchar is a huge portion of my core. Seamus Power is a huge portion of my core. A little bit of Grayson Sigg. Hey, good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you're ready for the Bermuda Championship. Good to see you towards the end of the show here. That is my core for this week. The players in orange are, more like 30 to 40%, whereas Rogers and Kuchar and Seamus Power, Putnam, those guys are going to be like 70% of my lineups. I should probably highlight Whaley. He's more in the 40% as well. 40% Cootie. I mentioned how you were high on him when we went through the price board. It makes some sense. It's just I don't like his draw. He's on the bad half of the draw. He hadn't been great on this surface. So, and his big weapons is his driver, is off the tee. And it's mitigated here. So, you and I will be pretty different this week in that regard. I do have Pearson Cootie once. I made sure to play him once because he's been playing so well lately. But I've been much, much more Patrick Rogers at that price point. I am just all in on Patrick Rogers this week. But thanks for jumping in the chat, Phil, right at the end of the show there. Thanks to everyone else who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Last week was a close to my best week ever. It was my best solo performance by getting the silver medal in one of the big GPPs that I play. So we're going to try and keep the momentum this week in a tournament that is not very consistent. And with the forecast that we have, there are a lot of things that can go haywire quickly. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to try to keep the momentum after cashing 88% of my lineups last week in Cabo. It'd be great to cash 88%, but I don't expect to. But we're going to try to keep the momentum this week down in Bermuda. So thanks again, Phil, for jumping in chat. Thanks again for all the support. For all the wagers you've made this week for the Bermuda Championship. For all the DFS contests you play this week for the Bermuda Championship. For this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.